We're online, I think. What are we? 15th April.
It's the 15th of
Play in
April.
playoffs. My God, I don't know. Is this exciting time of the year, or is this a time where you get a bit sad that man, the season's winding down, and soon there'll be that period where you go, what do I do in my life? There's nothing to watch or read, or man, you got to find another hobby for a few months until that preseason starts up again, right? But look, no doubt, those clubs that are still playing, they're feeling excited, and hey, man, I think there's some interesting things that happened in the last week, including OKC finishing one, right?
Hmm.
Orlando sort of finishing out of the play-in. That's a win in itself. My mate messaged me and said, "Hey, I think they can win a round." I said, nah, look, I've sort of
Okay.
been, I've sort of, been banging them all season. I'm gonna keep doing that, because then they keep exceeding my expectations, so they're gonna get swept, all right? but hope not. So, yeah, look, I guess we're gonna have a chat about that, and maybe break down some of these series.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you're getting so invested in NBA being over for specific fan bases. I feel like the fan bases like Washington, Detroit, Portland, Memphis, probably glad that the season's over and they can look forward to some off-season acquisitions to get them riding the ship, so to speak. But yeah, look, Phoenix crept in there as well. There was a lot of exciting games. I think that's probably the one thing that was interesting about the end of this season: the fact that there was a legitimate race for the first seed up
Mm-hmm.
until the end, and playoff seedings, including the play-ins, really weren't established. So New York got the second seed as well. That was pretty impressive. They really pushed for that at the end there. Um, and Indiana today really blew out Atlanta just to assert themselves. So we have our matchups set for 3 and 6 and 4 and 5, and we have the play-in kind of pending. And before we jump into like predictions and that, how do you feel? Do you feel like there's a disadvantage for the first and second seed because they have to wait a couple of extra days to start game planning, or do you think that's just irrelevant and they're the better seed and they'll win anyway?
I think when you finish first or second, you're in a position where you don't really care. I don't think that's a huge disadvantage. Probably not an advantage. Absolutely, I guess you would like to know who you're playing, but I don't think it's a significant disadvantage. You're feeling significantly confident here that these teams have to play that extra game or two to be able to face you, and you get this extra rest. And ultimately, I guess maybe from a coach's perspective, in that in the coaching group, that they're already creating the game plans for either scenario. That's the reality. It's like from them, that's probably more like, oh damn, we got extra workload here. We're trying to create two scenarios here. But as a player, I think you're sort of like, well, give us whichever matchup. We're going to kick the ass anyway.
I like it. I like your definitive. There's no issues with having a couple of extra days. Like the rest is good. The rest is good, I think, for some of those teams as well. So, do you want to start with play-ins, or do you want to start with the established
Let's
series?
start with the play-ins. Yeah, what we got? We got the Kings and we got the Warriors. I think in the West here. I got a little graphic on the screen. I don't think you can see it, but obviously it's just showing obviously all the play-in options and the already teams that in locked in spots. So this is an interesting matchup as far as I'm concerned. What didn't they play like 2 years ago? And there was a
No,
big
they played last playoff series.
was
Two
it last?
seven. That was the 2-7 matchup. Yeah,
Yeah, and that was it last season that obviously that the
yeah.
Kings were supposed to be ready to maybe make some noise, but then the Warriors upset them, and here we are, in a play-in elimination first game, and look, I feel like the Kings are not liking this draw, man, and look, I'm leaning Warriors right now. Give them that W here. The Kings aren't at 100%. They got some injury issues. They sort of shouldn't probably be in this spot, but they slid all the way down the last few weeks, the standings. So, man, I don't know. Do you feel otherwise?
I think I want to kind of defend the teams in the play-in in the West because their record is good enough to secure a playoff spot in the East, right? Like it was just a competitive seed. So when they're struggling, they are struggling. But what was their win total last year? Like I feel like their win total hasn't shifted that much. I'm going to pull it up now. I'm going to be the stat guy in real time here.
We've
For
quickly alluded to that
2024.
stat guy we need already, but
It's,
um, I,
it's honestly, if there is
I,
a viewer who
I,
is
I think I
is
think
keen.
I think at the end of the day, though, I know what you're trying to say. Look, the West has been a struggle conference for many, many seasons now, and unfortunately, you just got to deal with what it is. Isn't that what it is? I think there's been arguments made you should just rank them first to 16, regardless of conference. I don't really see the additional benefit of that. Of course, if you're that team like the Kings here, you might go, well, I'd finish in a higher seed. But then at that point, then you might as well throw out conferences. Like hell, we're just all in one division and like there's no conference, and then we lose that whole, I guess, classic structure that we're all familiar with at the NBA level. Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that.
Well, I don't hate it. I don't hate it because I think that there's some parity that could come out of that, so to speak. So, just for context, the Sacramento Kings last season 48 and 34. This season 46 and 36. So they've declined by 2 wins. But you're talking about a team last season that was able to be the second seed with that record and ended up only turning into the play-in. So I think that's a big shift in the culture of the thing. I'm aware my camera went funny there for a second. Sorry. That's a big shift, right? To go from the second seed to the seventh seed with 2 wins being different. It's a more competitive field this year. So
Who
they're good
cares?
teams.
They're getting
I've stalled
eliminated
enough.
either way, so that's my pick.
No, no,
It
no, no,
doesn't
no.
matter
You
where
know
you
what?
finish. The Kings are getting eliminated. Even if they made the playoffs this season and avoided the play-in, I think they're getting eliminated anyway.
You know what? I want to go. I think Sacramento gets the monkey off their back and they're able to beat Golden State. I just think we saw what happened last time when Steph Curry's backed into a corner and it's a game, it's a series deciding thing, which this is a 1 game thing. Steph Curry could go off for 50 points and we're not having a conversation. And the fact that it's 1 game, they're away, I believe. Yeah, I'll go with Golden State as well, which then leads into our 7-8 matchup, which is Lakers and New Orleans. New Orleans obviously slipped to here. I think New Orleans were flirting with that 4 seed, and it's just the nature of it. And I think they have the same record as Phoenix, but Phoenix has got the series divider in their favor. Do you think New Orleans has a chance against the Lakers and their 400 three throws that they're going to shoot, or are they doomed?
Is AD injured?
He's got a sore eye, so I don't know
No,
what.
he's back. He had back spasms. I guess I know you've been out a busy few days, but he left the game with back spasms. He was literally lying on the court before they helped him off the ground, and then he went back to the locker room and did not return. This feels like such a swing event, so a potential swing injury. This is going to be so hard to pick. Look, let's go. If you want to sort of look at it both ways, if AD is healthy, and that's like a healthy 100%, or as 100% as AD healthy can be, okay, because he's been day to day the whole freaking season with some sort of ailment, but he played like, I don't know, 70 plus games, I think, this season, which has been a while since he's played so many games, I think. All right, but if he's healthy at 100% or 90%, I think the Lakers are going to win here. But no AD, that's a whole nother story. That's a huge if, all right, and I think the next few days here, trying to get him ready to go, that's going to be such a huge Lakers sort of goal. Because it did not look good. It did not look good. And AD getting untimely injuries, well, how many times have we seen that?
All the time, except for this season when I'm playing you in fantasy, especially. But that's not important. How will this impact it? LeBron James is then the Steph Curry in this scenario, where he can totally win you a game in this scenario. And New Orleans had a really embarrassing defeat. It was a while ago in the in-season tournament against the Lakers, but the Lakers for 1 game can turn it on. I still feel confident with the Lakers with or without AD.
Yeah, look, I guess we're probably both leaning to the Lakers right now if we had to make a pick. But I think it's going to be a much closer game, much tougher challenge for the Lakers without AD. Could be a real swing game. You just got to come out hot, I think. You know, a lot of games have been decided early, and you know, never hurts to sort of play from the front, I think.
It would be a more interesting 7-8, 9-10 matchup than it is in the East. In the East, for the 9-10 matchup, we have Atlanta versus Chicago. I don't know why, but I'm getting flashbacks to last season. It's kind of interesting how the same teams keep ending up in the same spots. But last year, I believe it was Chicago failing to beat Atlanta, and Atlanta was able to get the 7th seed, Chicago going down to face Miami and then eventually losing. Do you think Chicago has enough, or do you think Atlanta, led by DeJounte Murray, is going to get the job done? I know Trae Young has come back. He's on a bit of a minutes restriction. I figure that will change when the playoffs actually kick in. But yeah, what are you thinking?
Honestly, the first thought here is who cares, right? Let's be clear, right? Like, really, who cares, yeah? But look, we're trying to make a pick here. I'm gonna go the Bulls. Yeah, I'm gonna go the Bulls. I think at the end of the day, they're healthier. Yeah, they obviously are missing a couple of rotational players, but as a bigger picture, they're healthier. I think that's important. Trey Young coming back, he's got 2 games under his belt now since his return from injury, and he's been rusty, which is expected. That's
Hmm.
the reality. And look, the Hawks have lost a lot of their depth with injuries again. And look, man, if I'm making a pick, I'm gonna say the Bulls will get this job done at least.
Interesting. I'm going to go with Atlanta. I just think I don't. I think ever since the Bulls
You've
fell
always been
off
high on
after
Atlanta, man. You picked them like last season to make top six in something, and then they just didn't even get anywhere either.
any day is a good day for them to make it. And I don't know. Maybe they'll play Boston. Maybe Boston blows a 1-8 lead. Who knows? Could be really fascinating. I'm going to go with that. I don't know. Do you care about the play-in? Do you think that like
Well, I think this
Miami
this
last
specific this
season?
specific matchup is sort of like this is all fodder. Like whether the Bulls or the Hawks end up into the 8th spot, okay, they're not gonna beat Boston. Like, does anyone seriously think the Bulls or Hawks are going to beat Boston in a 7 game series right now? Like, I think that's the point that no one cares about this matchup. I guess the more interesting matchup here is the 7th and 8th matchup where we got Philly and the Heat. And
Hmm.
yeah, man, I guess this almost feels like a potential top 4 matchup if these teams had probably performed more to expectation. Obviously, for the Sixers, that was a lot to do with injury. And for the Heat, it's got to do with a lot of, well, is it almost Heat culture that they just don't care and they just they finish at like 500, just above 500, and they have to scrap their way into a playoff spot and then maybe try here. And if they win, they're an underdog, and if they lose, well, they're an underdog. I'm not sure, man. But look, I'm actually gonna pick an upset in this first round here. But there's a 2 steps to it. But let's start with this first step. All right, I'm gonna pick an upset here. I'm gonna say the Heat are gonna beat the Sixers. Yeah, in this matchup, I'm gonna say the Heat will beat the Sixers. Okay, and that they will obviously grab that 7th seed.
I I don't disagree with you. So you've got Joel Embiid, who's come back from injury, had some glimpses, but I don't think it's unfair to assess him as not being the same player as he was prior to the injury. He just doesn't have the reps right now. I think he's only had 10 games max, with a couple rested. And Miami, fantastic coach team. I know that Nick Nurse is obviously a good coach and might be able to put Philly in a position to win, but I think a lot of pressure is going to end up on Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey, fun fact, has bad games against Miami. Miami really does something against him that he struggles to deal with. And yeah, I think the fact that they have a second round, they have whoever loses this will go on to play Atlanta or Chicago. I think that's I think we're looking at our 2 7-8s anyway. I don't think we need the 9-10 matchup to do much unless we're about to have an upset. So that's the play-in. Do we do the predictions of if this team wins, then they play this team, and who will win out of that matchup, or do you just want to?
Man, I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, so I'm happy to sort of maybe talk about that in next week even. But that said, I guess the second part I wanted to say here is that I guess from my pick perspective, which could be wrong. Okay, it probably will be. Alright, but maybe the Hawks will win. Okay, but I guess I guess I'm saying the Sixers will play the Bulls in that second play-in round, if you call it that, or third play-in game, effectively. All right, and I'm saying that the Sixers will obviously then be grabbing that 8th seed. Okay, and to me, this is a more interesting position here that the Sixers will be in because they've been a top 4 team for many seasons, and this season they are not, mainly because of Embiid's injury and how much time that they lost him for this season. Okay, but for the last few seasons with Harden and Simmons when he was healthy, and then Simmons freaking whatever mental health issues after everyone bagged him out that game 7 against the Hawks, they were always the favorites. I think if you look at the Sixers as underdogs, okay, playing the Celtics, I think that could turn into an epic series. Yeah, and health is important. Yeah, but let's assume that Embiid plays each game and is as healthy as he can be. Okay, in that sense, I think that series could be a real danger series for the Celtics. They would hate to see the Sixers, I think, out of all these 4 teams.
I think there's definitely some interesting implications from the bottom seeds, especially in the West. You know, you're talking about veteran teams going against some young teams. OKC, you think of as the 1 seed, prime candidate to have an upset from an 8 seed with some veteran experience, so to speak. So it will be. I think to bring it full circle before we go into our set playoffs, it's really interesting. I think this is the best time of the NBA because the games have purpose and they have stakes. And like when you lose game 1, it has implications for the rest of the series. And the regular season, I don't know about you, I definitely felt this way in the last, say, 2-3 weeks. You have to create narratives to care about. Oh, the race to the first seed. Oh, the race to avoid the play-in. And the narrative is set. You win, you go on, and you can compete for a championship. If you lose, you go home and you're done for the season. And there's nothing better than this. And this is what I think March Madness captures so well. And, you know, we get it in a more definitive product, as in after 7 games, it's pretty hard to dispute that the team that won didn't deserve to win. And so, you know, I'm excited. I'm nervous, but I do like the fact that Phoenix is going up against Minnesota. And is that my segue into the 3-6 matchup in the West? You betcha. I'll be honest with you. You could have a gun to my head and you could say you have to pick Minnesota, and I wouldn't. I'd take that bullet. I'm picking Phoenix. I'll pick Phoenix any day of the week. And I'm going to pick them for the same reason I'll pick them every round that they're able to survive. No, I don't think they're going to win the championship. There's just a continuity issue. There's a consistency issue, etc. But if there were 16 games that they got hot and made it work because they have the talent to do so, they're going to be trouble. And their line to the finals at this point would be beating Minnesota, who are very heavily reliant on Ed Edwards being their superstar. Good interior defense, but Phoenix isn't exactly an interior team, so I don't know how much of an impact Rudy Gobert will be. And Cat, I think just returning in time, maybe that disrupts what they're trying to do. Sometimes bringing players back from injury is a addition, but ends up being a subtraction because you already had the lineup set. And Naz Reid may be impacted of that, for example. But they've got to win 4 games. Phoenix just have to win 4 games, and I'm going to go with Phoenix.
Look, man, you're a Phoenix fan. Okay, I'm not going to hate on you to back your team here. Okay, that's cool. All right, no issues. Okay, but no way is Phoenix going to beat Minnesota. I cannot make this pick. It is not going to happen. I will tell you why. Because one, your big man is relying on Nurkic. That's it, Nurkic. Like, you're literally relying on Nurkic, and then Bol steps into the rotation. And as much as we're high on Bol, like, we're not saying Bol is a game changer at this point. Yeah, we're just saying he's a young talent and a prospect still, I think, in the league. Okay, so literally you're drawing really a bad matchup here against the T-Wolves, where you got Gobert, they got Cat come back, and they got Naz Reid now coming back off the bench, and your sole big here is Nurkic. Now, your second issue here is compounded by, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my observation that this season has worn on, including the last few games of the season, that, look, and we probably all knew this as well, you guys have 3 highly talented scorers, but you can only score with 1 ball. And if you look at the observations here is that 1 player gets hot, 2 players take a back seat, and that's really not successful basketball. You could just do that with 1 player that gets hot, or 2. You don't need 3. Okay, and in fact, I guess the last few games was probably Bradley Beal was the man that got hot. Devin Booker went cool, which didn't work for you. And in fact, I had KD too on fantasy, which we'll talk about later. And he was not really that impactful in the last few games because Beal was the guy that was like, feeling it. And again, I don't know, like you could say that's insurance. Oh, well, if that guy goes cold, then, that other guy might get hot and so on and so forth. And there's some legitimacy there. But at the end of the day, that isn't really successful basketball, man. So I cannot pick you guys beating the T-Wolves here in a series, man. But good luck.
Thanks. I think Suns in 6. What do you think?
T-Wolves in 5. Yeah, why not? Get it done. You guys can go on holiday.
Appreciate it. Then I can just follow it casually instead of super intensely. The 4-5 matchup in the West.
Juicy.
4-5s always are, right? You've always got
but these 2 teams matching up again. Did we not see these teams in the bubble? I believe.
They're different teams though, right? So you've got James Harden and Russell Westbrook added to the Clippers since Luka gave them a bit of thing. And Luka's obviously got a different running mate as well. And you're talking about, I feel like Dallas, I know this is probably a weird take, but I feel like Dallas was the Knicks in the West. I feel like they pushed the most to get stuff done, right? So Knicks kind of surged and they got to the second seed. I feel like Dallas was ninth or 10th maybe a couple of weeks ago,
Mm-mm.
and they just didn't stop. And they got all the way to the, is it fourth seed or fifth seed? Sorry, I'm
Fifth,
struggling to
fifth.
pull stuff up
So
right now.
like Clippers are fourth, and
So they got to the fifth seed. Now, you often hear about the Clippers not really having a home court advantage. But I feel like Luka's kind of proven that he's on that Steph Curry LeBron range where he can win a game home, away, 50 points. He does what he does. But even Kyrie has that potential as well. We saw it in that overtime game recently where he goes off for 48. The hard part with this is, does Luka flame out on the first round and we start to question his greatness? Or do the Clippers, with all of this talent and this assembly, and this was their year and they were doing so well at the start, do they just crumble right at the end? The hard part with the Clippers, it took a while to get here, but we got here with the Clippers. They're just not healthy, and they don't look right.
It's quite out.
Westbrook coming back from the hand injury. Kawhi's just had a variety of injuries. So he's had some hamstring tightness, some lower back issues, etc. It could very well have just been management. That's the hardest part with these injuries, is that we don't know if they're just managing players because they're not pushing for the one seed, but they're confident they're not going to fall into the play-in. I don't know. Paul George probably been their most consistent player, and that's never a statement that you want to be uttering as a confident fan. If Luka wins this matchup, no, I'm working through hypothetically. If Luka wins this, he goes on to play OKC, and then he's in the Western Conference Finals. This path for Luka feels very achievable. Luka is eventually going to get there. I feel like that's inevitable. He's going to get to the finals at some point. Is this the year that he does it? Because career year, legitimate MVP conversation. If you want to discredit what Jokic does as at a historic level, he's probably number 2 pretty safely. And Kyrie has really had a pretty phenomenal year considering how often we have to talk about Kyrie, and we really haven't talked about Kyrie this year, except for the fact that he's been really good. I think the Clippers, I think James Harden worries me in the playoffs. I think Paul George worries me in the playoffs. And I think their best player, Kawhi Leonard, this might be like last year where he comes back and he can only play a game or two and then his body breaks down because he's actually been nursing an injury. I'll go with the Mavericks, and I'll go with the Mavericks in 6.
I'm taking a moment to process all your information there that you're suggesting, which I'm not necessarily disagreeing with. I think firstly you mentioned about Luka flaming out. Have we actually ever seen Luka flame out? And this is probably a real testament of a all-time player. Okay, and that's a whole nother conversation, yeah. But to just touch upon it, all-time players do not flame out in big moments. Okay, they might have less impactful games, and they can lose games and series, absolutely. But they go out there and they still do a triple double, and they lose that game, and then you look around them and you go, well, that's because their teammates couldn't make a shot, and they did not have the depth or the personnel to support them in that run or whatever. I think the Mavs have made some really good moves at the trade deadline. And this has really fueled their ability to make this run at the right time. I'm not going to go as far as picking, multiple rounds right now, but if we're just talking right now about the 4th, 5th matchup where the Clippers facing the Mavs are hot, the Clippers are not 100%. Man, I think the Mavs win this series. Yeah, I'm going to probably go with you too. 6 games. All right. If anything, maybe the little knock on Luka. In fact, it'd probably be nice if the Mavs could win in 5 or even try to sweep. Is that sometimes his teams have not necessarily had that knack of just closing out. Yeah, they're sort of like they just like to play games and keep playing games. There's a whole bunch of games that you can think about Luka that they got to a game 7, and it's all like, well, why did we even get to a game 7? Could we just close them out in 5 and then just got some rest and ready for the next round? But look, I think Clippers got a huge challenge up there, up their alley. Look, I'd be happy for them for the win. There's a lot of vets there that you sort of would like them at least to win a first round, but they're not really peaking at the right time. They're starting to look old and creaky and unreliable. And unless James Harden suddenly turns up and got some playoff Harden we've never ever seen, I don't know. That's not really the track record, right?
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing is that we have to pick a player to go off. And I guess we'll talk about it soon with fantasy, but it's never a position you want to be in when you need a player to do something. And if all your hopes rest on that. And that's the thing, like the Clippers have declined since the beginning of the season when they went on their run. And probably a lot of that is simply due to the fact that Kawhi hasn't been playing. You know, it is sometimes we overcomplicate analysis. Kawhi hasn't played, their best player, and they're not as good as they used to be. And other players stepping up hasn't resulted in the same results. Shock horror. We heading over to the East. We do 3-6. Is 3-6 again, because I don't have stuff up.
This is a real juicy matchup after what's happened here with the Bucks at third seed and the Pacers at sixth seed and everything that happened during the season with these two teams matching up. And yeah, man, look, I guess again, Giannis is not healthy. Like, is he actually going to come back? Like, I think there's question marks there.
He shouldn't. Right now, like, this would be a clip. If we had an editor, like on the fly, I'd be like, clip this, put it in the shorts. I think if Giannis plays, we're going to witness another Kevin Durant scenario.
Wow,
I think
read my mind. You read my mind. I was actually thinking the same thing.
It's the same issue. We're talking about a deep calf strain that he acquired. You watch that video footage, it looks like it should have been an Achilles tear. It's not. But calf strains, when you play on them before you're ready, and he's not slated to return, he's not supposed to return for a couple of weeks. If he comes back because he's trying to play, not only is this now the second consecutive season where Giannis hasn't been able to be healthy for the first round, and that's an interesting narrative in itself that I guess people will catch on to eventually. But if he comes back, I do worry that we'll have a Kevin Durant situation. Kevin Durant was able to play for about, 13 minutes or something, and then it was over. And if Giannis has an Achilles injury, God forbid, I don't know how his game survives the same way that Kevin Durant's did. So because of this, it now turns into Dame versus Tyrese. And as someone who's followed Tyrese pretty intensely, he has not recovered really since that hamstring injury. In fact, his season started high and it's continued to decline. The in-season tournament highlighted how to play him defensively. And then ever since that and the injury, he just hasn't produced the same way. Now, Indiana's good. Indiana can rack up points against you, but they're young. And you're talking about facing a team that's got a little bit of championship experience, but then also someone like Damian Lillard, who, if you, a gun to my head, said, hey, would you rather have Damian Lillard or Tyrese Halliburton in a playoff series? I'd still probably pick Dame because Dame in 4 games can easily average 30, 35. There's going to be that expectation if Giannis isn't playing. And even if it gets close, I feel like he's going to hit a game winner. So I'm going to go with the vets here. I think Bucks can still win it, but I think Bucks are either going to get pushed to 6 or 7. I don't think they're going to sweep or gentlemen sweep the Indiana Pacers on this one.
Maybe you're missing an X factor here. Imagine this scenario. Bucks up 3-1, and then Doc Rivers loses 3 games in a row. And hold on, this is not an imaginative scenario because we've seen this multiple times before, have we not? So, look, man, Dame Lillard has had a bit of a down season. He's getting old, and he's like, man, this guy's, paying me, getting old, but, that's the fact of the matter. And this season hasn't shot it well at all, not to his standards. Yeah, it's not been a small decline. His shooting is literally fallen off a cliff. Okay, and that's a telling factor. And him catching fire is not something we've really seen this season. And you could say because now he's playing besides Giannis and he's a second option on many nights and so on and so forth and rah rah rah. But I think that's telling. That said, of course, the Bucks have a lot of vets that have been there and done that, and they know how to play. Bobby Portis could be a real swing player in this series. If he can, he's not going to be Giannis, but if he can put up similar production, especially in an offensive capacity, I think that will keep the games competitive, and because the Pacers do like to score. But that said, at the end of the day, I feel this is an upset. I'm going to pick an upset here. I'm going to say the Pacers will get the job done in 7. Yeah, 7 games here. Lots of question marks. Giannis comes back. Can he stay on the floor? Hopefully he doesn't suffer an injury like you were describing with KD, which is actually what I was thinking too, that there is a risk. There is a risk from what we saw as a non-contact injury that he just went down, and then now you're trying to rush him back fairly quickly because it's a meaningful series, yes. But, yeah, look, the Bucks are going to have to make some decisions there from a medical perspective.
But this has to be the logic of the front office, right? They watched Giannis go down last season as the number one seed, and they had nothing, and they couldn't match Miami. And so you bring in Dame Lillard. Hopefully, this is why you have Dame Lillard on your team so that you can get through that first round, give Giannis the time to come back. Even the second round, you could make a case and say that they could handle that. You know, like they end up playing either the Knicks or Sixers or Heat. You know, you feel like they could at least be competitive there with Dame. But maybe I have too much Dame stock, and I wasn't aware of it until this evening. But are you gonna do the same that I did? We have the Magic and we have Cleveland as the 4 and 5 matchup. We have Cleveland, who have definitely got their own question marks on health. And, Donovan has not really had a good last month and a bit in terms of consistency and play. Evan Mobley coming back after a couple of injuries and extended absence. And, Garland and Jared Allen kind of almost feeling like role players at this time, even though you'd want to say that they should have been, a little bit higher up, maybe at that tweener all-star level. And then you've got the Magic with Paolo Banchero probably single-handedly carrying Franz Wagner. That 1-2 duo, the more and more that you look at the numbers of Franz Wagner, they don't match up. It's actually interesting. I think probably a narrative that a lot of people didn't follow. He has not shot well at all this season, Franz Wagner, like at all. And obviously there's been a lot of other play. Jalen Suggs coming into play for Orlando, being a bit of a defensive stout. Jonathan Isaac playing these weird 10-minute stretches, but his plus minus is out of control, and his block numbers and steal numbers per 36 is ridiculous. It's an interesting matchup because it's youth, right? And I'd love to say Cleveland has the one up here because, Donovan Mitchell and playoff Mitchell. Well, after last year with the Knicks and playoff Mitchell not appearing and the bigs getting outplayed by one big in Mitchell Robinson, I feel like the Magic are young. I feel like they're feisty. I feel like this is totally a winnable series for them. I think the Magic could steal this one. I think the Magic could win it in 6 or 7. Are you gonna jump on the bandwagon, even though you're the
hell no? I'm not
bandwagon?
jumping on the bandwagon. All right, I'm being consistent here. All right, I'm being consistent. That's the key part of a successful basketball player and a basketball commentator that we are. All right, I've consistently said that the Magic are not going to achieve as much as we all dream and hope they're going to do. I'm going to ride this all the way, even if they get to the finals, all right? Because I've seen this way too many times. I've seen this way too many times where you get your hopes up a little bit. And, I would not be shocked if we got swept here. I would not be shocked if we got swept here. Okay?
Wow.
But you do make some valid comments. The Cavs are somewhat untested too. Though they do have, probably on paper, more talent. I think Evan Mobley is probably going to be a big part here to be able to step up. This could be a real series game for him to go, hey man, I'm a legitimate all-star sort of consideration in this sense. I think obviously Donovan Mitchell is not, he's been sort of in and out of the lineup a lot this season, and that's been hurting the Cavs in that sense that they probably could have felt they could have finished a little bit higher than 4th perhaps, especially with the Sixers sliding all the way down the standings. But look, here we are. We've drawn this matchup. It was a little bit like a deja vu, right? When the Magic were peaking, I don't know, about 10 years ago now, and they had to pay the LeBron Cavs, right? And obviously, we squeaked past them, I think, in that series here. But I'm saying that's not going to happen here. It's not our year yet. Of course, inside me, there's that little part that says, hey, I'd love to be totally wrong here. All right, but I'm going to say, look, the Cavs are going to get this done. Look, let's give us 2 games, yeah, in 6. Cavs in 6.
All right. I don't know if it's a weird tactic so that you actually end up winning either way because you guess right or Magic make it through. I'm not sure. It's an interesting one.
Well, you know what's funny? Hey, on that note, yeah, okay, let's assume no one listens to us, right? And it's just karma that floats into the air, right? Last week, I think it was, we talked about Devin Booker. We talked about Devin Booker recently and how he's been really quiet and did nothing. And then literally the next day after we went online and now, everyone in the world can listen to whatever we're talking about, Booker went off. Right? And he had a good game. That was not really sustainable, yeah, because then Bradley Beal came in on the scene. But anyway, but he went off. And I guess, look, end of the day, like you said, man, I'm totally I'd love the Magic to go as far as we can go. But I genuinely continue to go, we're over exceeding expectations. Literally a week and a half ago, we were in the running for the 2nd seed. Then we dropped all these games and we're like trying to avoid the play-in. It's been a real roller coaster somewhat in that sense if you sort of look at that perspective. And then we won the last game, we avoided the play-in, and we were able to grab the fifth seed here because all the standings were very close. All right, and here we are. At least we're not looking at an elimination game.
Thank God.
We're talking about
Thank God.
elimination. Hey, maybe we should move into fantasy and I don't know, man. Who goes first here? Do you want to go first? I don't know, man. I'm pretty
No, look,
chill.
I'll go first. I'll go first. I'll go first. First off, congratulations. There's no reason to be a sore loser. You really pivoted, right? So from the beginning of the season, where you started to sell a dweller a little bit, you made a lot of aggressive moves. You made a lot of changes. I think you figured out, and I think I figured out your strategy. You went the high efficiency players that get you blocks. You went for two categories that pretty easy to guarantee if you have the right personnel for it, and then you build around efficient shooters. So we traded Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic. They were probably the two best players that were traded in that. And Jalen Brunson, I reflect on that in hindsight. I should have pushed Maxey. I should have pushed Halliburton, right? I think I picked youth a little bit too much on my team because Jalen Brunson really had a career year this year, almost led the league in scoring at 6'1", but did it off incredible shooting. And I probably didn't put enough value on that. So that was smart. And then I think you picked up on trends with teams, right? You picked up on New York really being aggressive in the last 2-3 weeks. And you basically took all their players. And you also mentioned, the minutes thing. Thibodeau likes to play minutes, and minutes generates fantasy stats for you. So I think those are big ones there. It's really important to note that even though it's a 6-3 margin, it was close in three categories. It was close in points, it was close in turnovers, and it was close in three-point percentage. That's what it ended up coming down to. Incredible steals and blocks numbers. I could not compete, but it was in turnovers and points that I felt like was the hardest gamble. To get me points, I had to play players that were probably going to get me turnovers. So you might have noticed my lineup. I left a lot of people out.
Yep.
I had a 60-point lead going into the day with points, and I felt like I needed to try to find the right sweet spot where I put some players in who would score for me and hopefully put up some threes because we were only 0.03 away from each other in threes as well. And I would hold my 60-point lead, maybe get 100 for the day. You would be getting about 150, 160. And then we'd end up being close on that. I'd end up taking the turnovers and I'd hope for the 3-point. The problem with that strategy is I needed too much to go right? You didn't need a lot to go right for you to win. I needed a lot specifically to go right. And when you look at the stats of the day, some disappointing ones, OG having 6 turnovers. I still won turnovers, but that's not great. But it's not like who was on my bench was much better. I had Tyrese Halliburton have 2 turnovers, and I could have put him in for 12 points, and he would have given me 0 or 4 shooting from 3. So it really, I don't have a lot to regret here because it wouldn't have mattered what I did today. I didn't have the stats to back it. We had a funny moment where Tyrese Maxey on Tuesday goes for 52. If I had him in the lineup then, cool, I win points. But here's the caveat. He actually shot 2 of 10 from 3 on that day. So I win points, but I'm actually worse off in 3-point percentage.
But you lost 3 points anyway. In hindsight.
Exactly. So that's my point.
In hindsight.
So this is the trap, is that by the end of it, it was close. For people are hearing all these numbers out here, it was close.
Well, the numbers on the screen, just to let you know, so people can actually see what we finished off. Obviously, and look, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts from your point of view. Now the season's over, we can sort of unpack without, let's be honest. Firstly, one of the things I guess throughout the season was like we talked about it, but I didn't really want to give away too much. Yeah, I'm sure you didn't want to give away too much too, right? It's like, look, we'll give away some little bits, but like I don't want to give away my whole game plan. But you are right in some aspects. So you actually done the part to look into what I was doing to be able to try and suss out where I got to, or how I got to where I am now. And you're absolutely right. I literally looked at my roster when I was like 15 games behind, and I said, dude, if you cannot shoot, I'm getting rid of you. And I actually sat there and I was like, do I just drop Dame to the waiver? Do I just drop some other players that I obviously ended up moving on to the waiver? And I was like, no, look, let's just try and just give them away. If I can just give them away to somebody that are taking for someone that's better efficiency, all right, I would take it. And therefore I made those key trades, 1 for KD, okay, and obviously 2 for Brunson and Chet. who has had a much more efficient season than, say, Wemby as a comparison. All right, but maybe, from a statistical point of view, Wemby has probably, obviously won that category. However, I obviously then doubled up with some gambles that did pay off, because we talked about Wemby all season. We talked about how they were going to shut him down. You needed Wemby that last round. You needed him this last week to play every game like they were meaningful somewhat. And it was inevitable that the Spurs were not going to play meaningful games early on. And it was like the risk of him being shut down, which he did, and he didn't play that last round, was so that there's a higher risk there. And I think it was smart play from the Spurs perspective, but that was that hurt you fantasy wise. You can also see how where Luka, you love Luka, man. You love Luka. Yeah, you loved Luka. And from a statistics point of view, from those three cats, yeah, that obviously points, rebound, assist, he does some great things. But you probably learned throughout the season that Luka can, okay, kill you in things like percentages. Yeah, like 3-pointers when he goes like 2 from 12, yeah, or something like that. And turnovers. So there's those cats that he does win, and those cats that he just kills you because he does take such large volume, or he handles the ball so much. And therefore I was like, I'm willing to move on from him, and I wanted Brunson. I don't think I would have made that trade for Maxey or for Halliburton. Halliburton was hot. Would have been tempted. Don't get me wrong. We talked about Halliburton for Sabonis, yeah, and then you were like, oh yeah, you were like, you're still riding Halliburton, and I was like, oh, yeah, look, I'm not gonna swing on this one, so we left that one on the table. But at the end of the day, there's probably one more point that I was actually thinking about in January, I guess. Every move I made was catered for this matchup. Every move I made was catered for this matchup. I was like, I don't care about anyone else. I was like, I want to beat you. That was the goal. So I had to focus on. Yeah, there you go. There's some respect for you. All right, man. You were coming first. You're killing it. Yeah. I was like, the goal is to beat you. The goal is not just to win some more games. The goal is to beat you. So there was one more point here that look, ultimately in hindsight, I guess it worked, right? Every move that I made, especially the transactions I made with you, that key one with taking Brunson, taking Chet, and then obviously taking Brook Lopez too. But then I actually dropped him later, and I was fingers crossing that someone else would pick him up and not you. Okay, like pick him up back again, was because you were killing blocks. You were killing blocks. You were killing blocks at the start of the season. Okay, and I was like, I'm gonna try and weaken your team while strengthening mine, while looking at the cats that I need to make sure that I can try to improve on that would be relevant to playing you. And it was a long game here. It's a long game here. And look, like you said, man, a lot of things have to go your way. Okay. But you'd make some educated guesses, you take some gambles, and man, it was epic, man. It was epic. You're right. It came to the last day, man. It could have gone either way. I knew what you were doing. I told you earlier today, like I actually was going to maybe review my lineup and potentially make some tweaks. One consideration I had in this last day was to remove some of my games too, not chase the points, but to obviously ensure I didn't rack up turnovers. Yeah, and ultimately that went the other way, and I knew that. I've considered that strategy. And then I also had a nap last night, and I missed time because I think the game started earlier too, and I didn't realize that. And I was like, I actually logged in. I was like, oh no, the game didn't start at first quarter. All right, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going with the strategy that I initially had gone for, which was like just try and win every cat. And obviously I lost the turnovers, but I won the points because you chose not to play a full lineup in that sense. That said, a little note here in hindsight, which is always helpful, right? You still had 2 moves to make. Yeah, in hindsight, because you lost points and that you needed 2 categories, so that would only won you 1 back. But then yes, you would have racked more turnovers too. Risk, yeah, absolutely risk there. Is that you could have maybe taken 2 more gambles, rolled the dice on 2 more players. Who could you have dropped and grabbed from a waiver wire that was going to play, and who could pop off and maybe have a crazy 2010 game with 0 turnovers? I think the one player that I talked about, and I think he did have 3 turnovers, which is not too bad, was obviously Amen Thompson at the Rockets. He killed it. He killed it in his final game of the season.
I think that's the trickiest part. Is there was too many unknowns. I think I look at it. I made some good moves in the second week, but I think they were the wrong moves in the second week because I needed to make them in the first week. And that was dropping Paolo and Miles Bridges. I think I definitely got complacent. I think I talked about this last week. Just for context, Paolo shot 6 of 26 from three, and Miles Bridges shot 6 of 22 from three. If they weren't playing in week one, I probably could have filled their stats elsewhere because what they gave me, they gave me points, rebounds, and assists. You can get that elsewhere when you pick the best player on a team. Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma, quick names that come to mind, right? They would have given me similar stuff, but hopefully better 3-point shooting. That alone wins me the 3-point category, right? As an example there. And then there's other days where I took PJ Washington over Daniel Gafford. He had a terrible game. That's just how it goes sometimes. It really is. I had Bogdan Bogdanovic. You had Bogdan Bogdanovic. I think we both feel the same way about Bogdan Bogdanovic. Why the hell does he get paid so much money when he barely gets it in? I don't understand what the hell that man's doing. I think I'm really disappointed in Devin Booker. I think if we're going to end this segment on one thing, I wanted to bring Phoenix a pseudo championship, and Booker was going to be my man. Booker played 305 minutes this week. They had a really important stretch of games. They had a really important seeding implications for most of their games. He had 223 points. He had 27 turnovers. He had 2 blocks, 9 steals, 59 assists, 22 rebounds, shot 37% from three, 91% from free throw, and 49% from field goal. Those stats aren't bad, right? The problem is that he has 52 points one game and 13 points the other, or 1 of 11 shooting. He is very inconsistent. And the reason why I bring that up is because everyone else on my lineup actually gave me similar stats. Kyrie Irving gave me incredibly similar stats in almost 80 minutes less. Luka gave me pretty similar stats, or at least on par to do so. He gave me the same amount of assists and points and rebounds, but in 100 minutes less. And the thing is that Booker played more minutes than a lot of my players combined and didn't do anything with them, or didn't do enough with them, right? And when you talk about Wemby alone had 28 blocks, right? But he also gave me 21 turnovers. And I think when I look at my team composition here, Luka wasn't a bad trade. Luka was a bad trade because I already had Tatum and Booker doing Luka-like things. And I already had Paolo doing Luka-like things. And what I mean by that is using the ball on their team a lot, turning it over a lot, shooting a lot of tough shots, still giving me raw stats. And I think that was probably the part that, when I do fantasy again, because I will do fantasy again, I don't need that many superstars, or I needed more role players. And when we look through your list of players, we have Kevin Durant probably playing a little bit of a supplementary role to Booker in terms of usage, at least. Chet Holmgren not being the focal point of OKC, and that's why he's able to kind of roam around on defense, but also give you pretty good shooting. Naz Reid, Scottie Pippen Jr., which, we can't fault that. That was phenomenal in terms of what he gave you in the steals category. He pretty much pushed me away from bothering. Bobby Portis at the right time. You got lucky because Bobby Portis wasn't always that good, but he got lucky on that.
Giannis is out. You grab Portis. That's a fundamental.
Jalen Williams being a very specific role of player.
He was on the waiver wire.
That's the point. You had what's interesting? Domantas Sabonis is your Luka-esque player. Sabonis gave you 77 rebounds, 35 assists, not many steals, not many blocks, but he gave you 17 turnovers. And I noticed that you left him on the bench a lot in the last couple of days because you had rebounds locked up. You weren't going to touch assists. So you were like, well, I don't need points and I don't need bad shooting or turnovers. I'll leave him on the bench. And Rudy Gobert, probably, I don't know why we made fun of that to begin with, because he gave you 92 rebounds. He gave you 105 points. He gave you 17 blocks. He only gave you 11 turnovers. Those are incredible stats when you think about it. It's a lot for not much given up.
It's funny about the Sabonis point you made there. I literally dropped him that game that his 61 game double streak, I think, ended. Which was what timing is that, man? I feel like I've got some, I'm riding it right now. I've got a hot hand right now, right? It was like I literally dropped him that game. He had a really, I guess the worst statistical game he had of the season. Didn't get his double. But you're right. All these things, man. Were things that you have to pay attention to. Even more so when you're trailing by so much that I was earlier in the season. And I was like, take progressive gains. Yeah, slowly reel you guys in 2-3 games each week, because it was going to be close every single week because how it's been set up this season, right? And the cats that we played with. And even in this final 2 weeks, man, I was like, look, let's just play it out. Let's just play it out. And then, like you said, man, I think in hindsight, you made you realize that you only reacted when you were losing. Yeah,
Mm.
and that was probably the most, I don't know, fundamental error that you could sum up maybe what happened here. That it was it. Yeah. I'm a little bit curious to sort of give you one more question here for your fantasy season to reflect upon. Yeah. Would you build around Luca in future?
Yeah, I would. I think because he just gives you, when you talk about a week, he's probably going to give you, in 3 games on average, he's probably going to give you 100 points. He's probably going to give you 30 to 40 assists and rebounds. Will give you a steal or block. His shooting is not atrocious. I know he turns the ball over about 3.54 times a game, but his shooting is pretty solid. He shoots about 47% from field goal, about 80, 87, 88 from free throw, and a respectable 37, 38 from three, despite the fact that he takes tough shots. And then he has those explosive games where he goes for 73 against Atlanta, and he's a bit of a shifter on that front. Or he hits like 10 threes or something against Charlotte. Like, he's worth building around. As I said, the issue is you can't have another player who's just as high usage as him, right? Think of having prime James Harden and prime Luka Doncic on your team at the same time. You're guaranteeing yourself to never win turnovers, but win the raw stats. I really did need to just build around the auxiliary players. Daniel Gafford was a smart pickup by me, and then I dropped him because I was, I guess, impatient. But then I got him back because no one wanted him anyway. His field goal percentage, almost 80%, just gives you blocks, doesn't really turn the ball over. He was great. Like, he filled that role perfectly, and that's probably the issue. I didn't have enough role players. Tyrese Halliburton, if he was the same as he was before injury, then I'm looking at a different sort of scenario, but that's what happens when you hold on to players who maybe start to decline. Kyrie ended up being a good pickup from the waiver wire. Kyrie played really well
You're
for
welcome.
me.
You're welcome.
Keegan Murray, I picked up Keegan Murray late because I tried to prioritize blocks and 3-point percentage, but I look at his stats now. He had 54 points. He had 17 rebounds. He shot 41% from three, gives you a couple of assists, couple of steals, couple of blocks, but he had one turnover. Like, he's a good role player, right? Jalen Duren, I gave up on him because he had a tooth knocked out. It was never the same. I held on to Harden, shooting 27% from three. I probably shouldn't have. Tyrese Maxey, great young player to build around. There was no regrets there. Evan Mobley had more turnovers than blocks, which just doesn't really make sense for a guy who's 7 foot and pretty young. But, I think the thing is I needed to spend more time in this stat screen, and I think I needed to build my team appropriately. And I needed to know going in that I wasn't going to compete with you in rebounds and blocks. And I think there was a bit of an illusion there for a while that I was only like 40 rebounds down. And I was like, oh, maybe I've got this. And I don't know. I did, like maybe amateur GM here. And we had a good, successful young season. I've cut my teeth on the playoffs, and watch out next season. I think that's the message I give.
Well, I appreciate playing with you boys. Good fun. Bring on all the Shep players. I'll beat you all. That's cool. And I'll add another first place fantasy to the trophy. I got a few of these actually. So thanks.